Welcome to The Escarpment. This is my model railway build channel and I'm your host Jason. This video today, something a little bit different to what the normal schedule is. This one's going to be more about upgrading a 3D resin printer. It's a 13.6 inch screen. It does use the Chitu Systems E10 Lite motherboard. That's the path that I've gone on. So if you're going to reach out, ask me about other things, please don't. So why? This Transform from Phrozen came out a number of years ago. They're no longer upgrading it. Parts are just too hard to come by. I will be putting some links below in the description, especially about some of those core parts. So points to note, if you're going to go forward with the upgrade, you do so at your own risk. I'm not there for a 24/7 support. This is why I'm putting out this video. I have had a number of people in the past reach out to me, but it takes up a lot of time to take people through it. Let's go over to the workbench and get started with showing you on how to upgrade from a 4K up to the 7K for this Transform. I'm going to assume that you know how to take your machine apart. The order I did it in was I took off the build plate, put that aside. I then took out the LCD screen and the housing that it sits on. I took the doors off the Transform. Then I removed the front plate here. And then from there, I took off the back plating of the machine. Remember to take the 2 bolts up the top that fastens it to the Z-axis. And then I take this top plate off. I leave the Z-axis, stepper motor, all that in place. So I just find this is easiest to do this upgrade, stripping it right down. You can remove your LCD touch screen. You won't need that. Now that's the original Transform 4K motherboard, which sat in this area here. I've removed that, removed all the cables, etc., etc. You won't need that. Just as a point to note, you probably see here that this is the original power supply that came with the original Transform unit. I've actually gone ahead and upgraded mine. Now the outputs, it's still a 24 volt DC power supply, but the amps output jumps from 8.33, I think on the original, up to 12.5. Now you do not need to do this. That was just a personal preference for me, just to make sure I gave myself more headroom. Before you start disassembling your unit, I would highly recommend that you take pictures of every wire connection, taking pictures of the front, the back, everything else that was connected prior to any disconnection. The other important part to remember too, depending on whether you had the original Transform Fast or the original RGB LCD screen. For those that have already done this modification, you can sort of leave this step out. But if you haven't modified, you will need to cut a slot all the way across this component here. I believe there was only a small slot here or something for the original 4K RGB. I basically did that, I think, between a grinder and also my Dremel, and that way the LCD full PCB board was able to fit between that gap. But anyway, just remember that one. So that will be a modification you'll need to do if you haven't already done it or you don't have the original Transform Fast. As we move forward, you may notice certain things that are a little bit different to what you've got, and that's just because I've gone ahead and done some other customizations. It's not required for this 7K upgrade, but I will touch on those as we go through, just so you know and don't get confused. So first up is the front panel. I've gone ahead and I've actually swapped out the fans to the front from the 24 volt loud fans that are originally in it to these really quiet 12 volt fans. If you want to go down that path, you will need to put in some buck converters that take it 24 volt and decreases it to 12 volts. Also with the new LCD touch screen, I do have some brackets that I used basically that I've screwed in to the actual LCD screen itself, and then I ended up just using some araldite to glue it to the front part of the Transform. only due to the fact that it's a different sizing to the original LCD touchscreen. I also went ahead and cut out a front area here for the USB instead of the USB being at the back. And the other reason for that, not only for easier access, it's also because the motherboard has changed. There is no back access to the USB. It's now the front here, and that's where I run my cable. Concerning the ribbon cables, I highly recommend that you insulate it. This cable is different to the original cabling, which if you look at those when you pull it apart, they are insulated. The two-step process I go through is I first wrap it in an aluminium tape, and then I also use this material type electrical tape. Now you can see there I've done one side. Now I'm just going to do the other side. It is quite fiddly with this tape. I've now completed the aluminium tape, and now I'm going to put on this material electrical tape, and I'm going to do the same process, just do a strip down, wrap it around, and then do the other side. That is now complete, that cable. Now I'm just going to go off and do my other LCD cable. So you can see now both have been done. Another good thing I forgot to mention with this material type electrical tape, it's very good with heat resistance, so that will come in handy. LEDs, they do actually get quite warm, so this will just help with the longevity of your cable. I now prepare my motherboard. Make sure with your cables, the orientation of this blue as opposed to the orientation on this side. This goes to the touch screen, and I've used a 500mm cable there, and this one will go to the LCD screen because it needs to wrap around. This one's actually 600mm, which is more than enough to get to the LCD screen. You can probably see here there's a few other bits and pieces. Just turn that a little bit more. You'll notice this big box here, and then this little circuit component here. These are my buck converters. I'm just running 3 fans. So I've got 2 at the front and the side one for the back circuitry. Now, because it's only a single fan at the back, I've just used this particular small component. Because I'm running 2 fans from the front for the LCD, I've used this one. And not so much because it's bigger or whatever, can handle more power. It wasn't the power point of view. It was just I already had this, plus it was easier access to bring in 2 sets of wires, one for each fan that I've got at the front there. And then this one here, this is to your original LCD lights. This one here is to the side fan that comes off this board, and you can see here I've put attachments on to connect to the fans. Here is another connector for the motherboard. This is coming from the power supply that feeds the whole system. And then here, as mentioned, this is the buck converter. This is coming from the motherboard, so there's 24 volts on this side, it comes in, and then out here is 12 volts, and each of those go to the front fans. Now there's 2 ways to put this motherboard in. You can put it straight down. I mean, obviously you'll need spacers, just so you know your circuitry isn't grounding on this metal, but you can put it flat in there. Now the reason I haven't, well originally I did, but because I've now changed, I guess, my approach to the fans, there's only a certain amount of real estate. As you can see, the LED array takes up a large chunk of the area. So I've actually gone down the route of designing these stands for the motherboard and have it on an angle. And it just gave me a little bit more room, especially behind here with this cable going off to the LCD screen. Oh, and another point that I probably forgot to mention when you're taking it apart, that front LCD driver from your original Transform configuration, you'll no longer need that. This particular motherboard has all that circuitry built in. So these cables run directly to those other components. There's no third party in between. You can see there, that's how it goes on. And I'm not going to screw that into place yet because I'd like to get to a certain point, especially when I start plugging these components in. I can just do a bit of testing before I put it all together. With placing these on, you're going to have to drill new holes. I find the easiest, if you're going to go have that flat, before you put your spacers on, I normally will put it down and then mark where those holes are and then drill. And if you go down the path of these brackets, I would normally screw these brackets onto the motherboard first, then put it down, mark out, because these designs, they've got a hole here where you can screw down, where you can mark and then drill your holes if need be. I use these 4G 6mm screws. Now, I'm not quite sure what that equates to overseas. You'll have to do your conversions. A decent screw where it's not too big, where it's going to crack the resin, and not too small where it just doesn't grip. Now, just going back to taking pictures before you start dismantling and taking wires off. When you take this back plate off, you will need to unscrew this and take some wires off so it comes out. And that's why it's important to take photos of exactly where your wires are going so you can put them back in place. Another modification that I did make to this was looking under the bottom here. I ended up going with adjustable feet, and you can see here it twists and you can adjust the height. Comes in handy, especially if you've got a uneven surface that your printer's sitting on. Because what I needed to do with this type of foot was I had to drill a center hole, like just take one off. There's two parts to these adjustable legs. You can see there you can get a fair amount of height. So what I had to do with this particular set of legs that I brought, I had to actually drill a hole in the center of each one and then use the original bolts because they match the holes that are already there from the previous feet, and centered it through. With the bolts, I did have to put washers on these two, only due to the fact that on the other side, you've got the LCD circuit board, PCB board for the LED. So you couldn't screw it in tight because obviously it's coming through the other end, and you don't want to be then touching your LCD circuit board and cracking it because you're continuing to tighten something through to the other end. So just a couple of points there to note, just in case you do go down that path. Next is basically I'm going to start plugging in the main power areas. This one here's from your power supply. It goes into the 24 volt socket. Next is the LED fan, so make sure it goes into the LED fan socket here, because there's an LED fan and there's also a motherboard fan here. Make sure that goes into the motherboard socket. And then this one is the LED lights, and that goes into the LED socket. So now you've got all the power hooked up. As you go along, you might need to modify wiring, whether you want to shorten, lengthen, whatever. I'm assuming you know how to do that. Now, as mentioned, I have done custom fans, both here and here. This one just goes to the one fan at the back here for the motherboard. And I've also a new connector here for the front. This one controls both fans at the front. So I think on the original motherboard, up to 4 fans, because I think there's another one back here. Now, originally when I did my first upgrade, I did put this in, but again, tolerances was so tight and it really wasn't worth the effort, to be honest with you. This time round, I'm not putting this back fan in. It's only the side one for the back here and then the 2 front LED ones. I'm not going to go through with the USB upgrade. That's really up to you on how you want to handle that, because you could feed it out the back and you just have a wire out the back where you connect your USB stick to, and you can get a number of these type of USB different formats. And what I've done is I've fed mine from the back and all I needed to do is just to make sure I had that hole cut to the same size, and obviously the 2 holes for the screws to make sure it's fixed in place, because I use this type of USB internal cable where it's got a 90-degree at the front here, and that's really, again, due to some tight tolerances at the front here. So next, I just want to do a quick test, and I recommend, especially with these cables, that you just test when you put them together before you go all out and fasten everything, is just to test that the cables are right and in place properly. So I'm just going to attach this cable and just check the orientation of the cable blue. It faces outwards. Turn that on. You can see there I've hooked up an LED light there. The motherboard's on. Actually, the front screen, I know you can't see it, but I can tell you right now, it's all there. And just another take on the insulation part is I did try and test from the motherboard to the screen without the insulation, and again, I had a whole bunch of interference. So it is real when these cables are over a certain length. So do go ahead and don't skip that step of insulation. Just to show you that I'm not lying, I've got the screen that's operational there. You can see here, I guess some other mods you might see straight away is I've actually repainted the whole transform from that grey to a black. What I wanted to do was I wanted to sort of mimic its bigger brother, the Mega 8K. And you can see here I've actually gone ahead and designed my own logo for the Transform, the new 7K one. You can see there, and it looks quite smart. So, you know, while I'm upgrading, what I'm doing is giving it a bit of a facelift, because for me it sort of represents a new printer. While I've got the screen working, I'm just going to, I've plugged in each of the front fans. For those of you that got the original machine, you know how loud it is. So what I'm going to do is just go to a quick exposure test, and you'll be able to see and hear the fans. You'll hear how much quieter it is. You can see them spinning there. That's how quiet it is. And you can see also another modification that I've done, and I'm happy to supply this file, these new covers that I've put on the fan, and it draws the air in. You don't want to be exposed to that UV light, so I've done a full cover, and it works really, really well. And there we have it. So the first test, and what I've done is tested the LCD screen. This cable's plugged in correctly, all is good. I've sealed around the LCD touch screen. I've sort of just taped this cable more securely with the cable connection here, and I've gone ahead and just used double-sided tape just to pin these up against the frame. I've still got to feed this one around like so, and I've still got to test the LCD screen. 7K screen, I'll put a link below. Again, I get it from AliExpress. Now, a lot of people say, oh, do you really trust? But I tell you what, this is the hard case it comes in. The way this is packaged, it is 100 times safer and better than even what comes from Phrozen themselves. It actually comes even with a screen, although the glass screen is just slightly too big for this. It comes, looks like it comes with its own surround tape. I might see how that measures up against this Transform. And it seems to also come with an LCD screensaver. Check that out, I'll see if that's correct or not. But I tell you what, it comes with lots of different stuff. Now, what I wanted to do first is just to do a quick test on the LCD screen, just to make sure the cable at the bottom end of the motherboard is connected well. So what I'm going to do now is go to Tools. I'm just going to do the exposure test. Let me just tilt that a little bit, and you can see there the test is working perfectly. So the cable is attached securely. I've gone ahead, fastened this now fully to the main body, just due to the fact that there's nothing more at the front here. The top can go on without needing to change or come back to anything. The cable's in place, some double-sided tape just to fasten it against the frame so it doesn't move around and climb up in the way of the LED unit here. Now, one thing I still haven't finished yet is this. I'm refurbishing mine, which I haven't done yet. That's just the undercoat you can see there. Okay, next I'm going to put the main body on that has the Z-axis components. So it's just a matter of... This was actually originally black. It's just another minor modification that I did. There's your -Z connection there, and that basically helps with the honing of home. With the new motherboard, it has slightly different connections to the existing motherboard, so you will need to swap out these connections, and the board comes with all the connections. When I first did the upgrade, I made sure the wires, or the order of the wires, matched the original. But what I found was, while in the firmware, in the G code, there is a code in there where you can change the direction of the stepper motor. And I had to do that first up, and that was all good, it worked. But one of the issues I had, and it was quite dangerous, was while the direction and all the basic uses was correct, let's say there was a print that either got to a point where you could see it and it was failing and you wanted to stop the print. What was happening when I was pressing the stop button was, instead of the Z plate going up, it came down, and it freaked me out the first time it did it. And I was lucky there was only a light support on there, so it didn't crack my screen or anything. And it had me scratching my head, and I thought there must have been something in the firmware files that I can't get access to. Maybe something in there was wrong. And that's why I've reversed these wires to the original setup. I want to just do a test to see, once I do a stop mid-print, that the arm now goes up and not down. So that's what I'm hoping for, but I need to do a test. This is the -Z gauge here. It goes into the middle. Now the order of the wires is pink, blue, black. As long as you're going to wire it in that, this will be fine. And this is for the Z motor. I'm going to plug it in now, but I need to do just some testing. I just want to do some quick testing. And I don't need to have any of my screens in, anything like that. All I'm going to do is I'll go get a USB with a print on it. I'll just start a print, let it run for a little bit, and then I'm going to hit stop. And then hopefully the Z plate will go up instead of down mid-print. Okay, what I'm going to first do, I'm just going to load a G file. Because what I've done, because I've switched the wires around to what I originally had, the Z-axis is probably going to go in the opposite direction. So what I've done, just a normal G code, load that new one, which is just confirmed. I'm going to go to print. Yep, going down. go back down, and then I'm going to hit stop and we'll see what happens. So that looks like that has fixed it. With the wires facing the back of the motherboard, we have orange on the right side, followed by white, then red, and then black is on the left hand side. That is the correct wiring. Now that wiring is probably, I believe, is the opposite to what the machine was in the first place. So I'm going to put the back section on. The back plate, you can see here I also made a small fan cover just to stop the UV light. Again, you can see I've painted everything black. Make sure the cables are out of the way and now I've just got a bunch of screws to put in. When you do take this backing plate off, do remember the top Z scale frame. Now there's a bunch of screws at 8 all up, 2 on each side, and then there's 4 at the back here. I'm just going to hook up this fan, which I can get access to here at the back, which is great. I'm just going to pull these wires through for the switch and root up the top. As I said, take photos. I'm going to put this in, and then I'm going to need to come to the front to connect the earth. The power switch is now attached. I've now got all the wires connected, and just do a quick test, make sure nothing goes bang. Excellent. Okay, so that's the majority of the upgrade, I guess, as far as the internals go. I've got the doors on now. This is basically what it looks like from the outside. The doors have been recut out. I've got a different coloured perspex on there. I've sort of reconfigured the handles to go across. Mimics the bigger brother Mega 8K quite well. Let's talk about slicing. Now I'm going to take you through what I've done using Chitu Box. Now if you use another third-party software, Lychee or something else, you're going to have to go and explore that yourself. So this is purely going through the Chitu Box software and how to add a printer profile that matches the upgrade that we've just done. Now there's a couple of options here. You can go in and choose the Transform one, but it does limit some of your print settings. So what I've done instead is actually gone in and chosen the Megasonic Mega 8K one. You can see down below the plus sign has been circled. That's where you need to go and add the printer profile. Now when you click on that, it takes you to a page where you've got many brands, and you just need to scroll down to Phrozen, and then it'll open up, as you can see on the screen, a list of all the Phrozen printers. And there you can see the Transform, and you can see the Sonic Mega 8K. Now I'm not going to do the Transform one, but if you want to explore that, up to you. You can go and do that. I'm just going to give you the basics of what you need to change to make sure your printer profile matches the 7K upgrade. First up, go and click into the Phrozen Sonic Mega 8K. So first up, we're going to go into the machine tab. There's a number of things that I change. The name, it's not that important, but unless you want it to be called the Sonic Mega 8K, I'd go in there and change it to Transform 7K, whatever you want to call this particular profile. The next step is the mirror. Make sure it matches with what I've got on screen there. Next, this is where these next 2 items are a must, because these need to match the 7K 13.6 inch screen. Those items you can see there against resolution and size, make sure they match with what you can see on screen there. That is a must, it's mandatory. Otherwise your printer will not print right. So here we have the resin tab. Now you can change this to match whatever you're using. Those items you can update. It's really up to you, or you can use a pre one that's done elsewhere. I use Sunlu resin, so I've sort of just dialed in roughly to what mine equates to over here in Australia. So next we have the print tab. Now these are just the dialing settings. What you can see in front there, that are my settings. That's based on the resin I use, the room temperature and the temperature of the machine. Now you can use it as a guide if you want, and I've also sped it up a fair bit to what the normal is. And look, this one, as long as I've got the temperature of the resin vat around between 20 and 24 degrees, this what works best for me. But like I said, this is going to be something you're going to have to dial in your own environment. What I've got here may not even work for you. Next, you have the Advanced tab. Again, this is what I use. I still experiment with it every now and then. Trial and error, really. So whatever you can see in front of you, that's just what I'm using at this point in time. They may change. It really depends on the situation. I've revamped my LCD bezel. It's now been painted. It's all in place. A couple of other modifications that I've done. Basically, this item here that came with the machine, I've actually filled it with carbon just to help with some of the smell. Now, heating wise, you can see one of the units here, and all I've done is drilled a couple of holes on the side of the printer, put some grommets in, just so got access with the wires coming in to power up the heating. This main unit here just heats up the internal air, and I normally only set this at 25, and to be honest, I only really use this particular heater in winter, and I normally turn it on about half hour before I start printing, and really just sort of slightly heat the internal, heat up the plate, just so it doesn't interfere too much with the resin temperature. Brings me to the vat. I use this thermal vat band. If you search that online, you should be able to come up with the website, and they've got different sizes to fit different size vats. Once you put this on, plug it in, there's the plug right there. This is not the one that came with it. I brought this separately, but you can set your voltage. Now, normally I set this to around about between 3.5 and 4.5 volts, and that gives me enough to make sure I heat the resin between 20 and 24 degrees, depending on the weather. Whether it's during winter, I might turn it up a little bit. During summer, I usually don't need to use it, but I have been recently, just to make sure I've got a consistent temperature with the resin. It comes with a thermostat that you can just peel off the back and stick it to your vat. I find this very, very handy, because then as you're playing around with the voltage, you can see what it's doing with the temperature. Obviously, it is not instant. You do need to wait 10-15 minutes as you go through to dial it in. Winter printing has been great. It's been, like it is during summer, so I don't really need to worry about the internal temperatures of the space or the environment that I have it sitting in. When you do go to put your 7K screen on, just make sure you've got the orientation right with the cable, and it should be blue at the front. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to put this in, and also remember there on both sides of this screen there is protective film, not a screen protector, protective film. So I've still got the top one on. I've actually taken off the bottom. And again, I just want to do a quick screen test to make sure I've got the connection to the screen right before I go any further. I only need to test it for just a short period. Yep, the screen looks good. So I've got the cabling right. I do need to remove the top film. And then it's ready to apply the tape. So that's basically the upgrade path and what I took. If you want to come along for this ride, you will be doing so at your own risk. That's your machine, your responsibility. I will be putting together a bit of a support file. I'll zip it up It will include, all the STL files, the links to the main parts that will be required for this particular upgrade. And it will also include the G code for the firmware. There was a few tweaks I needed to do with that to make sure the stepper motor matched the transform. With some of the wiring that you saw, we needed to change the direction of the machine, and there was a few other little tweaks that I had to do. In saying that, when you do order your E10 Lite motherboard, please make sure it has the 13.6 7K firmware included. All I'll need to do is just give you the G code file, and to be honest with you, uploading that is very simple. You need to just take that file, put it on the root drive of your USB stick, put it into the machine, turn it on, go to the print, and then hopefully you'll see that on your screen if you've got it in the root directory, and then you can just hit print and that will load that G file for you. But anyway, hope you enjoyed. I hope this is informative and it helps you if you're going through this journey. Until next time, bye for now.